almost ready to go. Oh shit. Oh shit. Let me just check a few things. Our very first stream on Kick. I'm just making sure that everything's actually working over there. Oh, it seems to be a bit quiet. Am I quiet? Am I quiet? Am I quiet? Okay. Yeah, I mean, if I don't speak loudly. Yeah. If I don't speak loudly, I'm quiet. But, okay, I think that's okay. Yeah, we want to be hitting the yellows. That's let's just see real quick. Make sure everything's good over here as well. Boop-a-da-ba-ba. Okay. Saying I've got 2 viewers. Someone's viewing us on Kick, apparently. I don't know who that is. But we'll get into it. We'll jump into it. It is 2 minutes past 3. Let's hit it. Good afternoon and welcome to the Enemy Stream, where we cover all the latest in gaming news, everything that's happening in the gaming world. We're going to go through and pick out the most interesting bits. I don't cover everything, alright? You know, DLC's dropping, new games, 100 new games coming out on Steam. I don't cover that shit. I try to pluck out the most important gaming topics, and I give you my honest thoughts, opinions, and feelings on them, and hopefully make you laugh, maybe make you cry, oftentimes black pilling, but sometimes white pilling, sometimes positive. So, we'll jump into... I'm going to be honest with you, today is not a great news day. I've not got a lot to work with here. There's a few interesting tidbits, but honestly, it's been a pretty slow news day. I guess post not E3 come down is a thing. Like, we did all the big shit last week and the week before. There's a few more events coming, but right now, everything's just sort of blah. And to be honest, everyone's talking about this fucking submarine. I think the entire world is focused on 5 idiots in a tube at the bottom of the ocean. Not to speak ill of them or anything, but man, that's a fucking stupid idea. So, I guess we're all focused on that right now, and there's not a whole lot going on in the gaming world, but we're going to jump into things in a moment. First, I just want to remind you that the Enemy Stream is live every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday at this time, 3 PM BST. We're live on Twitch, YouTube, and right now, our very first stream on Kick, very topical, everyone's talking about it. I'm going to be talking about it later in the show. We're live streaming on Kick, spreading the enemy team tendrils far and wide, and if you ever want to watch episodes, clips of the show, catch up with the games that we're developing, best place to follow us is on YouTube and TikTok. You can find us by just searching Enemy Team Games on both of those platforms. Right, that's enough of the promo. Let's just jump straight into things with our first super exciting story. This is blowing minds. Oh my god. This is from gamesindustry.biz, and it's an interview. We're covering the Star Wars mobile and free-to-play Ubisoft's bid to transform its business from CEO Yves Guillemot. I can't say the surname. I can't do it, so I'm just going to call him Yves. I can do that, although I'm sure there will be French-speaking people who will correct me and say I'm also not saying that right, but fuck you, it's Yves. And he's saying other publishers buy companies, we try to build things. Okay, cool. So let's just read through and pluck out a few interesting bits. Recently, Mario plus Rabbids Sparks of Hope came out, and it was a flop, essentially. It's not done too well. Which is put down, Eve says, the market is suffering a little bit with the inflation situation. We've seen this a lot of studios. How many more times do we have to hear pandemic team? Oh, well, it's inflation. Oh, well, I don't know. Sometimes we just deliver 6 out of 10s. Hey, sometimes we deliver shit games. There's a lot of excuses coming out from the big studios. We're into the excuse era where, like, every single game that drops, like with Redfall, they went, oh, well, when we acquired them, they were already working on the game, and we weren't really paying attention, so, like, whoops. It's just constant, endless, like, how did they justify hyping these things up as, like, God's gift to gaming? New, amazing game, AAA trailer, it's gonna blow you away, it's gonna be amazing. It comes out to 6 out of 10, Not many people play it. It drops off, and they have to turn around and then say, "Oh well, you know, like our programmer had an upset tummy, or there was a pandemic like 5 years. Pandemic was fucking a decade ago at this point. Like, who's still talking about the pandemic? Like, yes, we're all in a sense still reeling from it, but holy shit, like, get over yourselves. Also, companies like mine, we had to go through a pandemic with no money. You went through a pandemic with like billions in revenue and assets and, you know, investors constantly vying to buy your business. So you've got multiple lifelines, you have options, you have leverage. So, you know, spare me the sob story. But anyway, he put it down to there's more pressure on all the families to be more careful. We see that everywhere. We met with a first party partner at midday, and they've also seen the influence of the economic conditions and how much people are buying. And again, sorry, just that goes completely against everything that we've ever been told. Like, you know, the whole bread and circus. Like, whenever things are bad in the world, whenever there's economic downturn, war, you know, cultural shifts, whatever, we generally see an uptick in the consumption of media. And this has been the, you know, the selling point of the games industry for what, the past like 20 years, that, you know, we are recession proof, we're pandemic proof. Whether it was '07, '08, '09, or the pandemic, everything that's happened since then, games are still selling, people are still buying and engaging in games. And so it's weird to see, hey, suddenly this argument's flipped, and it's, oh, well, everyone, when everything's shit, people don't rush towards escapism. No, 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 they're not buying games because that's not a really good form of escapism from like the hell world we currently inhabit. And it's like, that doesn't track. Actually, what that sounds like is the games are not doing a very good job of providing the escapism from hell world, and so they're just going elsewhere to like drugs or like opioids and killing themselves, like horrible stuff, like whatever gets you away from the horrors of today's reality. They're going to go to whatever does that best. And I'm sorry, like, video games are frequently and increasingly doing a worse and worse job of that. So I'd put it down to that personally, but we'll continue. And I think he goes on to say, yeah, we should only drop like a major title, so like Rabbids should only come out once every console generation. Okay. But Ubisoft has reevaluated its slate on the back of a disappointing year. They've had redundancies to some areas of the business, I believe we've covered on a previous show, cancelled projects. The firm says it will be focusing more on its bigger IPs, such as Assassin's Creed, woo, and bringing those to more platforms. Yay! That's exactly what we want, is more of the same. The game that we've been playing every year since, what, 2007? I believe Assassin's Creed 1 dropped just towards the end of '07. Been playing that every year now for, what, 16 years? And that's definitely what we need more of, is Assassin's Creed, and it needs to be bigger and better than ever before. However, part of Ubisoft's success has been its penchant for trying new things and building new brands, which is somewhat true, I guess. We'll continue. We're taking advantage of opportunities to make sure the brands we create can be played by more people across the world. It's very important to concentrate on that. Like, having Assassin's Creed on mobile means that it can be in more territories. You know, okay, great. To be fair to that point, you know, if we just scroll down here, then in the Ubisoft forwards, they talked about, you know, Roller Champions is still going. They've got X Defiant, which, yeah, is a new shooter IP made up of existing IPs like assets. Like, hey, you play as Sam Fisher, or, you know, the pig from Beyond Good and Evil, probably. I don't know. So it's like, yes, they have done new stuff, and yes, we've got things like Star Wars Outlaws and Avatar coming. But here's the thing is, I don't think I'm alone in saying this. I don't think this is like a mind-blowing point, that a lot of what Ubisoft does, when it seems new, it's not. Under the hood, it's the same engine, it's the same game mechanics, it's the same system. It's like the Ubisoft open world design is a thing. Like, I've not come up with that. That's a very well-known, well-established thing. We saw things like Steep. Steep was adapted into the mountain bike? I can't fucking remember. You know, they have like snowboarding game, and then they're like, hey, you're on a mountain doing snowboarding and skiing. Now you're on a mountain doing, you know, BMXing and skateboarding or whatever. And you go, okay, these are very, very similar experiences, but every time I engage in it, I'm spending $70 for what is essentially like a giant asset flip with some new stuff in it. It's a lot more complicated than that. I know as a developer, that's like a big no-no to say, but that's how it comes across to the gamer. Because there's an inkling, there's a bit of truth in there. More than a grain, actually. And even stuff like the Skull and Bones game, which has been delayed and delayed and delayed. Everyone, as soon as we first saw that, went, isn't that the sailing section from Pirates of the Caribbean, from Assassin's Creed, Pirates of the Caribbean 7, whatever it was, years ago. And it's like, yeah, they've taken that mechanic and they've spun it off into their own game. Avatar: Frontiers of Pandora kind of looks like it's under the hood Far Cry-ish. Probably is going to involve a lot of the same mechanics and the setup and the way that you engage in the open world. And so it's like, yeah, we don't just want the same thing year on year overall. Like, some people are happy with that. Obviously, Assassin's Creed keeps selling. But we do want new stuff. And we have a lack of that from the majority of the established industry. It is all about the same game coming out year on year on year. Or it's jumping onto trends. It's, hey, now extraction shooters are the big thing. So, hey, guess what? Marathon, which is historically a first-person narrative-driven game, now it's an extraction shooter. And you go, why? Well, it's the thing, so we have to adapt to that. And everybody rushes in and does exactly the same shit. Ubisoft sets itself apart in a very sort of shallow, surface-level manner, in my opinion, where it's like, is it really you're doing new stuff when under the hood it's always the same? When it's always the same kind of mechanics, it's always the same flow? I don't really find any of this to be particularly exciting. And sure, like, Star Wars Outlaws, it looked okay. It looked alright. I've got that cynicism towards these things where I go, okay, the trailer looks nice, the raw gameplay presentation looks like it's a really fun game, but does it actually play like that? Remains to be seen. Let's stay glass half full. Maybe it's alright, but it doesn't really look, other than the, hey, you've captured the Star Wars original trilogy aesthetic alright, and the character designs are pretty inoffensive, and it looks like it could be interesting. Well, okay. It's okay. Like, it's nothing more than that. It's just okay. Does that really set you apart from the competition? And are you really pushing forward gaming in the way that your business, Ubisoft, and your competitors used to do in the past? No, not really. He goes on to say, just skipping down a bit, misses E3 a lot. That's good to hear. Not many people actually say that. Most people seem in the industry to actually be happy that E3's gone. It's a shame the industry isn't putting more effort into getting together to show their games at the same time as there are not many publishers. I think I should say, as there are not many publishers out here. Come on, guys. Proofread your shit. The fucking computer does it for you. Just go into Word and click, like, spelling. Click the spelling button. Jesus. We can spend more time with journalists. They can spend hours with our games. Having also done that with Microsoft and the Summer Games Fest before. I mean, hey, actually, Eve and I are on the exact same wavelength, because I've been saying this for ages, that the Summer Games Fest and that format is awful. It's terrible, because it's all scripted. It's all controlled. There's no fluidity or humanness to it. It's all exactly what the marketing agency running the show wants you to see. It's all, what you see in the trailer is what you get, but there's no opportunity to poke and prod that. There's no opportunity to sit down and play that thing for any amount of time, for journalists to ask hard-hitting questions. You just don't get any of that. So, I mean, I do see Ubisoft and Eve, I guess, as elements which are a bit different in the industry to the rest, who are all essentially at this point just total spreadsheet sludge men. But it's still not enough. It's like, sorry guys, not meeting my standard. Not meeting my standard at all. And clearly not meeting everybody else's standard, because you're not making as much revenue as you used to. So let's see. I did see something further down here that I thought was interesting. Yeah, blah blah blah, bigging up Mirror's Edge, very, very cool. Yeah, maybe it's scrolling down. Nevertheless, Eve tells us that the issues these games have faced are more to do with the wider challenges of building AAA games. So he's talking about Assassin's Creed and oh, and of course, there we go. COVID-19 lockdowns have played havoc. Like, yes, okay, great. Talking about, though, like, trying to build, yes, as he says here, when you look at Rainbow Six Siege, 6 years in the making, Assassin's Creed was around the same time, The Division was 7 years. To create games that are very different to what we are used to, you need iteration, you need time. The more innovation it is, the more time it takes. So that's why everything's taking a fucking age, I guess. And it's like, okay, but again, there's something there that doesn't fundamentally add up, because if it takes ages to make these things, but they're minor variations of what you made previously, the question is, what are you doing with all those hundreds of members of staff? The months to years of time? Why isn't anything coming out of that process that actually is exciting us, that is actually original? Like, Mario Rabbids game, it was okay, but it was just sort of like XCOM for babies, I guess you could call it. I played it, I thought, this is okay, but whatever. Assassin's Creed, I gave up with that like 10 years ago because it just became obvious it's the same game over and over again, and so on and so forth. And so I agree with the logic, 'cause it's what I say on every single episode, that we need like fast-paced innovation. We need decisive action to be taken, and we need to be doing things in a way where we are not just trying to make things bigger and more bombastic and higher graphic fidelity at the expense of actually pushing forwards and creating whole new gameplay experiences. There has to be a balance to these things. So I agree with the sentiment, but I don't see that coming out in practice at all with the products that they make. And of course, we've covered this on the show previously, that they are courting further investment, potential total acquisition, like being bought out. And so they sort of have to play the game, and they have to, it's like a nuclear arms race. If everybody else, if all your competitors are operating in this way, if everybody else is launching live services, if everybody else is doing the giant bombastic experience that's basically just a giant fucking movie where you click X and win to give your customers a dopamine hit, well, then there's sort of a need to keep up with that competitive drive and just do the same thing. Essentially, just keep spitting out the same stuff that works for you. Hey, look, they're doubling down on Assassin's Creed. Exactly what's happening. They say this is why Ubisoft is often first to jump in on new things, whether that's a platform, business model, or technology like VR or blockchain. I know it can't simply buy its way into these spaces should they take off, and so it gets involved early. And it's like, okay, but new is not necessarily good. Like, jumping in to blockchain, NFT stuff, like, is that something that anybody actually wants? Not really. Like, I don't think none of us wants new for the sake of new. We are fine with same old, so long as it's great, so long as you're doing stuff that advances and pushes it forwards, like Mario Kart 8 as an example, or Mario Kart 8 Redux, whatever the fuck you call it. So I think they've re-released it 3 times. But that's like the pinnacle of the Mario Kart experience, and along the way, each one of those iterations did something like Double Dash, adding in, crazy co-op mechanics. That was great, and Mario Kart on the DS was awesome because now I can play it like at school with my friends, and we can all be playing together. Like, those innovations were awesome. It was built on a solid bedrock of something that we are used to, we're comfortable with, and eventually we get nostalgic for, but they've advanced it as they go. That's what we want, not necessarily, oh, well, this is new, so therefore that's going to be the next big thing. That's the thing you have to do, because that's the logic driving this massive push towards extraction shooters, is that's the big new thing, and some of these extraction shooters have made loads of money, therefore, new thing is good, we must do it. And it's like, well, that just floods the market and then destroys new thing and makes it shit. But these people don't care about that. Anyway, we'll round this off. I love this part as well. So he says, Eve believes that Ubisoft has the brands and the partners, including major shareholder Tencent, to help it get where it needs to be. Those other publishers, they buy a company. We try to build things. Having said that, Activision was able to do a deal with a Chinese publisher to do Diablo and Call of Duty on mobile, so we have done a bit of the same. This is exactly my point. Like, this is the arms race. It's sitting back and saying, like, well, we're different from the other girls. Like, we're not like those other girls. But then you look and you go, well, okay, you don't buy companies up, but you are a bought company that will probably go through a full acquisition process at some point. And you say that you don't just buy companies up and copy the competition, but then you say, hey, the competition's making loads of money, so we've got to do the exact same thing. And it's like, so are you making any decisions? Are you driving your business forwards? Or are you just allowing the competition to drive you forwards? And let's bring it back around to the question I always ask, which is, and is that best for the gamers? Is that actually best for your target market? Is it best for your consumer base? I would argue, no, absolutely not. Emphatically, no. Terrible, bad. It makes money, and it improves the speculative value of your business, or the real world value of your business, so that you can receive further investment. Like, great. But does that actually benefit us, the people who play the games, in any way? I'd say no. Let's see. He concludes, if you look at our last Assassin's Creed, it did more than 1 billion in revenue. Whoopee! Rainbow Six is also doing well, and we are coming with Rainbow Six Mobile, which will help reach a broader audience. This is another thing that we always have, is forgoing the audience that gives a shit for the broader audience so that you can make more money. This has also been killing gaming. We are growing our brands, and it's our goal to make sure our plans become bigger for these games, as well as creating new things too. And again, the priority is just listed out there. And this is, a well-rehearsed kind of spin session. And even then, it still comes through as, what are the priorities? It's growing, making as much money as possible, increasing the value of the business, making things bigger, making things more bombastic because that potentially attracts more people. It looks better. Shareholders will be happy. And, and also we got to create new things as we go. But pragmatically, if that just means re releasing the same game again with, like, hey, it's not Assassin's Creed in London, now it's Assassin's Creed in Baghdad, but now it's in this other Middle Eastern town, but now it's over here. It's just, it's not new. It's Potemkin innovation. It's fake. And we all see through it, and this is why the response to these things, even the Star Wars Outlaws game, you go, okay, yeah, like I said, aesthetically, you go, hey, they've nailed the feeling that makes us feel all warm and gooey inside because it takes us back to the 80s or the 90s or whenever you engaged in Star Wars. But it doesn't actually, it shines through as like, this doesn't actually feel new, though. This feels like it's going to be a very run-of-the-mill experience. And again, maybe I'm judging that too harshly, but I'm not alone in that sentiment. You see tons of people saying this because it's the sort of general vibe that we're all starting to develop, where it's like, oh, it truly is the same thing year on year. If it's called Assassin's Creed, okay, like, more fool you, you should expect it to be that. But when you're being given like whole new experiences, and then under the hood, you scratch off the surface and you go, oh, this is something I've played 1,000 times. It's just unbelievably demotivating. And so, if they're having a bad time now, unless they have really, turned a corner and they're doing amazing things behind the scenes, I don't know, I think they'll continue to have not so good a time, and that will probably drive them to go, well, we just need to push into mobile markets. We need to push into markets that give less of a shit about quality and are more concerned with just escape from hell world. They don't want to do drugs, so let's just give them a slot machine on their phone and try and extract money from them that way. So, you know, not a great interview in my opinion. Doesn't really sell me on the Ubisoft magic, but there we go. So we'll move on to our next story. Similar in theme, actually. Xbox games apparently have to hit 10 million players to be considered a success. And this is also why Xbox isn't getting in on the VR market, which we'll cover in the next story. It kind of bleeds in. So this is all coming from one interview that Xbox Game Studios' Matt Booty did. Matt Booty! Speaking to the Hollywood Reporter. I'm not going to go through that interview because it's quite long and there's a lot of like boring stuff in it. I just wanted to pluck out the bits that I thought were interesting. So as it says, apparently the games need to reach 10 million players in order to be considered a big accomplishment. This is also why they're not doing VR at the moment. We'll cover in a second. And they mentioned we have 10 games that have achieved over 10 million players life to date, which is a pretty big accomplishment, but that's the kind of scale that we need to see success for the game. And it's just not quite there with AR, VR. Booty seems to be indicating that Xbox developed games need to reach 10 million users in order to be considered wildly successful, and he stopped short of saying which games those are. And he also doesn't mention whether that 10 million mark could include numbers from Xbox Game Pass. I keep forgetting. Let me just look up real quick. Like, Xbox Games Pass number. Subscriber count. We do this every episode. Google fucking sucks. 25 million. There's 25 million people. So yeah, obviously if a game goes up on Games Pass, there's a good shot that, 10, 20, 50% of those people are going to jump on board it and play it. So I actually think the more interesting thing here is less about which one of those games meets that criteria and how are they counting those numbers. That's somewhat important. The bigger point is more like, is that not absolutely fucking insane in terms of sustainability? Like, if you think about the bedrock foundation of the world of gaming, since the kind of rebirth of the industry in the 80s with Nintendo, there's always been a drive to deliver big numbers, of course, like big game sales, great. And records have been smashed year on year on year for 30 years straight now. And that will set to continue as the market grows, as more people have access to games, and as games in many ways become more affordable. But does that seem like, rewind back to the Xbox launching, does it seem reasonable for the Xbox to need Project Gotham Racing 2 or Halo 1 to shift 10 million copies in order for those to be a success and in order for that to be sustainable? Like, absolutely fucking not. This is not a reasonable way to run games businesses. This is not a reasonable way to run services. And it's such an insane expectation that it then starts to force, like, think of the pressure this puts on the development teams. One, I mean, like, anxiety inducing to the extreme, because your commitment as a game dev to a project is, as Eve said in the previous article, like, games can take 5-10 years to make. They're a multi-year process. So you're being told you've got to go for something which essentially hits the lowest common denominator. Like, you can't make anything that's niche. You're massively de-incentivized from making anything risky because you have to get 10 million people to onboard and either buy the game, or if it's free to play or through Game Pass, there has to be some kind of monetization post-download. So there's got to be battle passes, or there's got to be this, there's got to be that. So immediately you need to make it super accessible to everybody. You can't make it too risky or too new or too innovative, or it's going to take too long to onboard people. You have to build in monetization systems. The sheer size of the product is going to require you to sell it for a huge amount of money. Or if it's free to play, it's going to have to be absolutely jam-packed with microtransactions, or it's probably going to be both, right? What are the odds of you actually being able to make a great project? And then when you look at them saying, last week, hey, we've turned a corner and we've got loads of great first-party titles on the way, which we've spent tons of money on. You look at PlayStation doing the same, saying, hey, we're going to launch like 10 live services by 2027, all for the PlayStation 5. And you go, well, all of these games are gigantic. They're all massive projects with, 100, more than 100 at this point, like 500 to 1,000 man teams, plus support teams of hundreds and thousands of people out there. All basically going for the same 10 million number, all trying to access the same mass market appeal. And it's like, right, well, what about all of the audiences? What about all of the experiences in between those mass market experiences? Do we get any of those anymore? Let's also remember that it's those experiences which have built up the games industry to be what it is now. Like, GTA 5 has you running around killing things in much the same way that you run around and kill things in Halo, but they provide really different experiences. And you can be a fan of one and the other at the same time, but generally speaking, those two games existing allow for different audiences to find their niche and to play their specific, the game that they like. And that's why people didn't like it when Halo started shifting towards, iron sights and fast-paced movement. It just started feeling like a COD clone. Why was Microsoft doing that? It's because they're looking at COD making more money than Halo, and they go, we want that, so we're going to emulate it. As I just said, it's the same reason why everyone's moving towards extraction shooters. Makes money. They want the money, and they need it to make that much money because they've all built up this infrastructure, team sizes, etc., which require a tremendous amount of money to run. And what's the best way to do that? Making a series of very interesting, innovative, niche titles that you sell for 40, $50 once every couple of years? Or releasing, a handful of $500 million titles, which are designed to last 5-10 years as a live service? Like, you're incentivized to go towards that because you only need one of them. Like, this is why Sony's strategy is, let's just release like 10 of these over the next couple of years, because you only need one to be the next Fortnite to offset all of that cost and to become the stable moneymaker for you for, the next decade. It's not, is this, again, to bring it back around, is this best for gamers? Is this what anybody wants? And could this explain why every single time we watch one of these game showcases, like the Xbox showcase, all the not E3 events, the response generally is like, mid, Most people go 6 out of 10. I was a 3 out of 10 kind of guy for most of those because it's just, you look at what's being offered up and you go, this is just bland. This is just boring. This is just safe. Well, they've priced themselves out of being unsafe. And to me, gaming has always been an unsafe medium. Like, and I don't mean in the sense of like it's dangerous to play games or anything, although it can be if you get addicted. I mean more in the sense of it's a gamble. It's always been a gamble making games. It's always been a gamble releasing consoles, trying new peripheries and building experiences for those. And it's that it's like riding on like the cutting edge, the tidal wave of progress, and trying to not fall off and die is what forces you and pushes you to make amazing experiences that completely blow people's minds and completely like change their perception of what a video game can be and gives them awesome new experiences, memories that they'll treasure forever. Like, we've had that consistently since the 80s, all the way through up until, I would say, starting around the early 10s, certainly by the mid 10s, so the past sort of 5 to 7, 8 years. That's rapidly decreased because I think en masse, a lot of these businesses just hit a critical point, like a point of no return, where it's like, Destiny's budget was $500 million, just Destiny 1. When you hit that kind of point, and then that forces everybody else competitively to put more money in to try and compete with something of that size, there's no going back from that. Now there's no room to do the smaller stuff. Now there's no room to do the innovative, risky, actual like crowd pleasing stuff. Now you've just got to go for something which, I guess, to put it another way, to summarize it, because I want to move on, to summarize it, when people look at these showcases or they end the year and they look back and they go, wow, this gaming year kind of sucked. It was mid. That was it was just meh. You think you'd think that is the industry fucking up and making mistakes, when in actuality, that's exactly what they want. They don't want anybody in the industry doing stuff that's crazy and constantly pushing things forwards like we've had in previous generations, because that would mean they'd have to do the same thing. It's much better for the competition to be a bunch of bland, very samey experiences than a whole shitload of constant, non-stop explosive change and non-stop innovation. Do they want the gaming world, PC gaming, console gaming, to be more like mobile gaming, where you boot up the App Store and you go, oh yeah, more slop, more shit, more microtransactions, but it'll keep me distracted for a few minutes and I'll drop a couple of dollars into it. Like, yeah, that's exactly what they want PC and console gaming to turn into and to become. So where you might see this as where you might see the failings of the industry as incompetency or lack of care, in reality it's actually more you're not giving them enough credit, I guess. They're a lot smarter than they let on, and they are doing all of these actions with intention. Again, is it best for gamers? Absolutely fucking not. It's best for them, it's best for shareholders, it's best for their holding companies, but that's just the position we find ourselves in. And until more people, more studios start stepping up and doing things intentionally in the opposite direction to this, that's not going to change. But we'll move on. Well, I say we'll move on. We'll actually cover another piece from the same article, essentially, or from the same interview. Super hot today, by the way. My throat's killing me already. Boiling in here. I have to close all the doors so I don't get noise coming in from the outside world, but then that just turns this place into an absolute hot box, so... Dying. And wearing all black. I always make this mistake. Always wear black. Great in the winter, not so much in the summer. But yeah, so we'll cover this as well, because what was alluded to was them not being interested in VR. And this article summarizes it. So Xbox will look at VR more seriously when there's an audience there. You'll be waiting a long while if you're waiting on an Xbox VR headset. Even though there was rumblings of like Microsoft. I mean, Microsoft was involved in headsets a while back. They probably still are in some capacity, but looks like we're getting no link up. So this ties into the previous article that we covered. So unlike PlayStation, Xbox hasn't made any concrete moves in the VR space. And that's because they don't think there is an audience there just yet. Right off the bat, like, no, wrong. What Matt Booty has actually said is, in order for them to invest in a title, they have to be reasonably confident. Like, it has to hit the 10 million users, 10 million purchases, whatever, in order for that to be an accomplishment, an excess, something that's worth continuing to do for them. So with the VR market, I mean, let's take a look at the Meta periphery lineup, all of them. They've come out and said there's about 20 million headsets out there. And it's like, that's a decent number, but that pales in comparison to the number of gaming PCs or the number of collective gaming consoles in the world. PlayStation VR shifted 5 million units apparently. PSVR 2's only been out for about half a year. They're hovering around 600k. And so, yeah, and who's making games for the PSVR 1? Nobody. So the actual available addressable market for VR titles has actually shrunk as the hardware progresses. We need these platforms like getting bigger and more people acquiring those headsets, which is happening at not such a fast pace. So the problem is not that there isn't an audience there. There absolutely is. And it's also ignoring the potential audience of like, hey, if we make a killer app, the killer app, the killer game for VR, for a specific headset, let's say, then that's going to become a must-have item, and then that becomes the value proposition of, why would I buy the PlayStation VR 2? It's because Enemy Team put Gunday on it, and Gunday's fucking awesome, and it's like the future of gaming, so you got to go out and buy a PlayStation VR 2. That's the benefit of addressing the VR market right now. But as I just covered, it's like Microsoft has such a massive structure, such massive, monetary needs. Like, they have so much shit to pay for. They need revenue that is safe, stable, annuity revenue, something where they can start the year and say, yes, X, Y, and Z live services are doing absolutely great, and our battle passes in Halo and this, that, and the other are also doing spectacularly well. Safe, repeatable, you start every year in the black, and everything's just, it's just profit on top of that from there on. That's what they want. And so, yeah, why would they, think about it like this. The people with all the money, who have all the capacity to take risk, have no incentive to do that. And so what does VR need? It needs people with deep pockets to take huge risks, making amazing content. We've got amazing hardware. We've got the PlayStation VR 2. We've got the Valve Index. We've got MetaQuest 2, 3, Pro, and more coming. We've got all that. What we don't have is an amazing lineup of games. In terms of volume, it's getting better. As I covered last episode, we are getting more games, but in terms of quality, in terms of like medium defining experiences, not so much. That's pretty few and far between. Well, the people with all the money to be able to do that are saying, no, there's not enough audience there yet. We need somebody else to do the hard yards, take all the risk, and then what will they most likely do? They'll copy whatever formula has worked. So whatever the extraction shooter of VR is going to be, the thing which is new and shiny and makes VR that much more special, if that delivers 10 million new VR players to the medium, suddenly you'll see Microsoft take an extreme interest. And so it's all completely back to front. It's literally on businesses like Enemy Team and the handful of developers that we watched in things like the Upload VR Summer Showcase. It's on us with no money, no support, scraping together money, trying to raise money through Patreon or Kickstarter or whatever. It's on us to deliver the tens of millions of audience members in order to justify you jumping into the fray. Crazy. Absolutely crazy. But, as he says, I think for us, it's just a bit of a wait until there's an audience there. We're very fortunate that we have got these big IPs that have turned into ongoing franchises with big communities. And he goes on talking about all this stuff. And it's like, yeah, so what you'll see is they can just sit back on those big IPs. They can sit back on their Game Pass revenue flow. And they can just wait. And the second that VR is viable for them, then you'll see Halo VR or fucking Viva Pinata VR or whatever. Suddenly that will drop. And it just sucks. It absolutely sucks because instead of things being pushed forwards at like the breakneck speed that we've been experiencing for like 2-3 decades, which has been great, not complaining about that, it's been awesome. It's challenging as a developer to keep up with it. And a lot of people get killed along the way. Unfortunately, businesses go under. They're not able to keep up with the times. But it's like, as a consumer, it was never better. It was amazing because every year, absolutely the best possible products were always laid out in front of you, that you always had something to look forwards to for the next year. 5 years, 10 years. Console announcements were actually like an amazing thing because you had no idea what to expect. Now, I think we can all already predict what the PS6 and the Xbox, whatever the fuck, is going to be. The Xbox, I guess it'll just be Xbox Series XSS. It'll have some stupid fucking name. We know what's coming. Like, we know what games are coming. And VR is such an exciting space because there's so much unknown there. There's so many routes and realms to explore, and it's just not happening at the speed that's needed. VR in its current iteration is like almost a decade old at this point. When was the DK1? DK1 release date. Holy shit, no, we're past 10 years. DK1 was March 28th, 2013. Holy shit. So, VR as a medium has been going on for a tenth of a century. And it's nowhere near the point that it needs to be because, yes, while Meta has put billions into the hardware side of things and their metaverse, experience, Horizons, whatever the fuck it's called, there's just not been enough being put into content because the people who should be delivering that just aren't, because they don't want to take any risks despite having all of the capital available to do it. Absolutely insane. I have nothing more to say on this. Let's just move on. That's too much of a depressing. I mean, okay, it's a depressing point. The positive is like, okay, it is on us, but then I say victory is ours for the taking, but of course, the second we do something popular and successful, these people are going to swoop in and try and acquire us, and we're going to say no, and then of course they're going to copy the formula. So, hey, I guess the biggest we've been chosen to fight the greatest battles. Okay, I'll take that. That sounds like fun. Awesome stuff. Right, we'll move on. And we're almost coming up on an hour. I spent too long on that. I'm sorry. I don't want to waste your time. I don't want to waste my time. I got a shit ton of videos to get through. Holy shit. Anyway, let's cover this. So Amaranth, is that how you pronounce it? Gives Twitch the boot as Kick steals second streaming star in under 2 days. Streamer's announcement came barely 48 hours after XQC announced his $100 million deal to stream on Kick. And I think the interesting point from this is not just that we're very quickly seeing people, it's not like, is it surprising that we're seeing streamers jumping from Twitch to Kick? Not at all. Hey, it's our first stream on Kick right now. We're doing multi-streaming. I fully expect to be kicked off at Twitch at some point, so we're just hedging our bets, making sensible decisions. I think what's really interesting here is the streaming world with Kick, and we've seen it with things like DLive and Cozy and other platforms. There's more risk-taking and innovation happening in like the game streaming world than the gaming world. Probably because the monopolization of platforms like Twitch is essentially like it's reached a breaking point where people just cannot deal with this any longer. And so alternative platforms, competitive platforms are being set up. And it's like, this is, I'd say, a very, very, like positive vision or like positive blueprint that we can look at for what we should do in the games industry with how we make games, how we build studios, how we do publishers. So for example, if we go through, where is it? I've missed the part. Yeah, what we do know, though, is Kick's revenue split is far more generous to streamers than Twitch's. Twitch's 50-50, sometimes 70-30 cut, as opposed to 95%, I assume, for some streamers on Kick. And a bunch of other things as well. I mean, Kick's also in a beta phase, so we don't know where this is going to go. But that empowerment of the creator over the IP holder or over the platform holder is exactly what we need in every other medium, like film, televisions, etc. needs it, but gaming absolutely needs that, because there is a increasing or decreasing incentive to make amazing games from a developer's standpoint, because it is a multi-year risky process, of which if you have to go and get the capital to do that from a publisher or an investor or whatever, you immediately lose creative control. You're not going to make the game that you want to make. You're going to have tons of directives from on high that goes completely against your sensibilities and against your creative desires. And in the worst case scenarios, I know I keep bringing them up, but like we see with Antimatter, you do an amazing job for years, you make amazing games, you receive investment, you get acquired, and then a couple of years they shut you down and kill the projects that you were working on. And that has a massively negative, like demotivational effect on the rest of us. Because it's like, why would you get into one, why would you get into games? And two, why would you set up your own fucking studio and take all that unbelievable level of risk, emotional, personal, financial, etc., and anytime possibly something good happens to you, you get screwed over. And we had this with my previous business, whether it was talking to investors, working with publishers, taking on work, work for hire, working for other studios. Every step of the way, it was like getting, just pounded. I'll put it that way. Double pounded, triple pounded, new holes were opened up to be pounded in, quite frankly. It was fucking brutal. It was the worst shit ever. And it killed us. And then we died as a consequence because we got stretched too thin, I'm afraid. So the positive here is like, look, this seems to be making major inroads in the streaming world in a way that so far, like the energy and everything, like YouTube, for example, has not been able to match this. YouTube live streaming has been going for a couple of years, and Kick has immediately come in and literally like kicked up an absolute fucking storm of interest off of the back of Twitch making a series of beyond fucking stupid decisions. But the core of it to me is like, look, this is coming from, if we just look at like the information on Wiki, it is backed by stake.com. Okay, casino shit, don't know what's going on there. But it's got people like Trainwrecks TV involved in it. That's awesome. And they're onboarding guys like Aiden Ross, XQC. You combine that with like how they're paying or how they're divvying up revenue splits, and it's very much creators first. Looking at the people behind this, it's like remains to be seen which direction it's going to go. Like, hey, it's all great today and the grass is always greener on the other side. Awesome. But today it's about what do we do to make the watchers, what would you call them, viewers happy. And it's like, you look at what they say on the website, it's about like reduce moderation, because the moderation on Twitch sucks. It's about things being more open, more free, more accessible. You're less terrified. Like us streaming on Twitch right now, I have to constantly moderate what I say and how I act, because there are words that are banned, there are concepts that are banned, and the rules are applied incoherently. So they're setting a standard that makes it better for viewers because they're not scared of their favorite content creators dying. The content creators are getting more money. It just puts all the power in the right kind of place. And it's like, that's what I think we need for gaming, is we're not going to get rid of, in the same way that you're not going to get rid of Twitch. It's always going to be there. There's always going to be a YouTube, etc. Well, there's always going to be an EA or an Ubisoft or a Tencent. But that doesn't mean we can't do something Kick-esque. That doesn't mean we can't make, like, imagine a publisher that had a rule of no matter what, it's a 95-5 split or something to that nature, where it's never about we acquire the IP. It's never about awful revenue splits. It's never about, hey, the production schedule has changed, therefore we need a total renegotiation that's completely in our favor because you've technically breached contract and yada yada yada. I've covered this on previous streams and I'll probably go into it in more depth in some specific videos, but the negotiation process that goes on behind the scenes when making games is fucking awful. It's so corporate, but also in such like a childish like the games industry is such a childish industry, so you have the worst like childish egos and behaviors combined with like the most just greasy fucking like Wall Street level corporatism combined. It's fucking awful, and the worst possible thing for making like innovative creative products, right? So I think this is, I'm not going to cover this too much more, and we're coming up on an hour and I want to round things off. But I see this as like an amazingly positive step. I really hope that Kick continues to grow. I hope more people continue going to it. I don't know if people are watching us on Kick right now. If you are, hello, like, thanks for watching us. We'll stick around for a bit. We'll see how it goes. I mean, D Live went to shit. That place sucks. So it remains to be seen. But this is a great step forwards for streaming, and I really hope that we can sort of learn lessons as this goes to improve the world of games development. Remains to be seen. Let's see. I had a thing on Star Wars Outlaws, but I think I actually basically covered that. This article, it's just an article covering like, hey, like every planet in Star Wars Outlaws is said to be larger than the entire map of the Division 2, and it's like, who gives a shit? Like, wow, it's big. Oh my god, like, does anyone remember when No Man's Sky was like, hey, we've got 10 trillion planets and they're all big, and you go, okay, but what's the interaction? What's the win-loss state? What are the game loops? What are the things to keep me engaged? And it's like, nothing. So, okay, massive maps equals good. I think we're over that. Especially with Ubisoft games, it's like, whether it's Assassin's Creed or Steep or The Division, it's like, okay, massive spaces, but kind of boring. I mean, I believe, like, giant chunks of the Assassin's Creed Odyssey map just had nothing on them. I've not played it, but I remember plenty of people talking about just sort of barren, expansive areas. Reminiscent of Cyberpunk's, like, tunnels, where it's like, maybe that's just content that was cut, but they couldn't cut the map. So you've just got to leave, like, the geometry there. Don't know. But it's like, clearly that does not engage people anymore. It's not a USP to say, hey, our map is gigantic. Like, okay, great. Like, so's everybody else's maps. Who gives a shit? But I don't think we need to go into this anymore, because that's a pretty boring story, and we already covered it. I don't know. Yeah, like I said, this week is really boring. So today is really boring. This week has not been too interesting. We've got a story of Diablo 4. Chap over at DualShockers, Robert Webb, saying we should start stop calling them microtransactions and start calling them megatransactions. And it's like, yeah, I could talk about that a bit, but it's pretty dry stuff. And it's like, yeah, it's bullshit that microtransactions are now like $25. But that's not exactly a new thing. I think what Diablo 4 has done is just pushing the boundaries. It's just, give them an inch and they'll take a mile. You look at the comments on a lot of these stories, and plenty of consumers go, well, hey, it's just cosmetic, so what's the issue? If somebody else wants to spend $25 on a hat or on, skeleton armor, who am I to judge? Just leave them be. And it makes the company a bit of extra coin, so it's all good. And it's like, they don't seem to see that this is all interlinked. Like, these same people will probably be like, hey, but I hate free-to-play battle pass orientated games. I hate that. And it's like, well, they're one and the same, dum-dum. And obviously they're trying to get everybody to the point, boiling the frog slowly, where it's like, right, you're not going to have a choice. Everybody will be playing free-to-play battle pass games filled on top of that with microtransaction, megatransactions, whatever you want to call them. So, I don't think renaming them, if somebody's willing to buy a microtransaction for $25, does renaming it to a mega transaction really make a difference? Would that person really not buy it because you changed the name? I don't think so. So it's not, I guess it's like, hey, we're owning them because we're calling them out. Mega transactions, macro DLC, like, okay, sure. I don't think that's going to change anything. I can't imagine any of these people changing course anytime soon. As we've seen with BattleBit Remastered, the way to beat these people is just to make better products. Sure, you can kind of tarnish them, throw slurs at them, try to rename their own systems or whatever, and hey, we do that here. We do criticize and we call people poo-poo heads and all that kind of stuff, and that's fun to do. But the reality is that's not going to change anything. Like, sitting around and complaining about stuff only gets you so far. You actually have to step up and do something. So rather than renaming microtransactions to megatransactions, why don't we just make games in a way which essentially don't require microtransactions, or do it in such a way that it's incredibly ethical, positive, good for the consumer, where they don't even consider it in the realm of micro. Like, let's try and innovate and do stuff that beats the competition. BattleBit, for example, not only had a much higher player count than Battlefield, but I think it's now hit something like 60, 70,000 concurrent players. So day on day, that thing's growing. I don't know if that's going to go on forever. Maybe it's a flash in the pan. But the fact that that's had a more successful, better launch than Battlefield 2048, and they're selling it on the basis of, this is a game, you buy it, you enjoy it. We may release stuff that you pay for down the line, but we're not planning on doing battle passes. We're not planning on doing microtransactions. Like, hey, turns out that that's really effective. People really like the sound of that. If they'd come out and said, yes, we're going to launch mega transactions, we're going to put $25 skins in for your tanks and guns, but we will name them mega transactions, as to be honest and truthful as to what these things are. I don't think anybody would like that. That doesn't make anybody go, oh, well, at least they're calling them mega transactions. Like, they're not lying to me. They're not trying to trick me or deceive me. So I guess that makes it all right, this highly predatory monetization strategy. Like, no, it's the strategy that people have a problem with, not the name. You could call them Glenblobs. You could give them the Gajurgums. Hey, our game's full of Gajurgums. And you go, fucking hell, I hate Gajurgums. So it's not the name that matters. It's the practice itself. It's how it's applied and it's how it's done is the problem we all have. You're not going to make these people change course because, honestly, it makes too much easy money. It's predatory for a reason. It's preying on people who should know better but for whatever reason don't, and are probably trying to just fill holes in their heart and their soul. Quite frankly, I think what drives a lot of this. Because at the end of the day, most people would prefer just to be able to play a game and unlock stuff, like we used to, than have to constantly spend money in order to feel good. It's horrible. It's such a horrible way, I always think, like, back to my childhood, when I was playing Lilac Wars or Banjo-Kazooie, would those experiences have benefited or improved if they had microtransactions in them? If I had to pay to continue playing? No. Of course not. I get to the end, I beat Andros, and it's like, well, you only get the scoreboard entry if you give us $5. No, that wouldn't make those things better. That wouldn't make the game better, and it would certainly tarnish and taint the memories. And it would put me off playing those games altogether. The frog has been boiled, so here we are today, and you cannot avoid Diablo 4 or Halo Infinite being filled with these things. But again, as I say, BattleBit shows that all you have to do is just provide these kind of experiences, innovate, do great stuff, and don't include the parts that people hate. And hey, you could have a massive success on your hand. You can completely embarrass the competition and maybe, just maybe, create a different pathway moving forwards for games. Start to really change things. A lot of people tell me that like what I'm talking about and what I'm advocating for is just like pointless. Like it's just not going to happen. We're not going to change anything for better. Everything's fucked, Andrew. It's only going to get worse. These people have too much money and too much power. It's like, okay, tell that to Howard Hughes versus Pan Am, and look at what eventually happened to Pan Am. Like, tell that to the myriad of massive businesses, monopolies, empires that have fallen. Like, big things fail. There's nothing on earth that's too big not to fail. And everything fails eventually. Everything breaks apart eventually. That's entropy. Like, that's physics and maths and science and shit, dude. Like, eventually things will fall apart. So I refuse to accept that the future is mega transactions and that just shit is fucked permanently. Wrong. It will be as fucked for as long as people who know better don't try better. And that's what we need. So I think we'll round off on that. That's a positive note to end on. And the only other story I have is EA Games becoming EA Entertainment, like a pure corporate move. I'm sure there's something important there. I don't give a fuck. And I got shit to do. So this has been the Enemy Stream. Thanks a lot for watching. We are live every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday at 3 p.m. BST, 10 a.m. EST. If you want to watch replays or just clips of the episode, head over to our YouTube. And make sure to follow us on TikTok. Just search Enemy Team Games, at Enemy Team Games, where you can see a lot of updates to things like Project Web, Gun Day, a lot of cool stuff happening on that front. And I'll be doing a playtest on that later, so we'll have some more footage to share with you on all of those games and more shortly. I was thinking about maybe covering the Nintendo Direct tonight, but it's only 40 minutes long, and quite frankly, it's going to be a load of Japanese games, and, I don't know, maybe an update to Tears of the Kingdom or something. Not very exciting stuff. I don't think I'm going to get many yucks out of that, quite frankly. So, I think you'll see me again on Friday for another Enemy Stream, so we'll see you then, and have a great rest of your day. And I've lost the button to do the outro. There we go. See you later.